Welcome to In Focus. I'm your host, Lyla McBrearty. Here we're a podcast where we talk about photography and what's not usually discussed in it. I'm here joined by a special guest, Nick Wiltshire, who is a photographer and a technician at Bucks University, although it's your last day.
Yes.
Sad to see you go.
Thank you.
How are you?
Well, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You get all your questions.
Yep. All my questions.
That's good. I've got all my prompts. I know what I'm talking about, I think. I don't know. Gonna make it up as I go along.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So I guess first question is, how did you first get into photography?
Oh, how did I first? Right. Okay. So, I think what happened was that I didn't have anything else when I was about 8 that I was into, and my other friends were all into music and sport. You know, 8. Maybe I was a bit older. Maybe I was about 11 or something. And I remember that my sister was given a little 110 camera. It was about that sort of oblong, sort of rectangular thing, tiny little lens, and it had a cassette that go into the back of it, and the negatives are about that big, so they're really, really small. You know, for the benefit of people not watching the thing, it was about a centimetre across, something like that. So they were really, really tall, really, really small, and I borrowed it, and I took some photographs. I remember going around outside the back of my house and taking photographs of animals and things like that. I was really into mice at that particular point for some reason. Not sure why, but and I kind of I enjoyed it. I think I got the film back, and it was took some photographs, and they came out really nicely. So that it went on from there. I wasn't very academic at all when I was at school. Didn't have a particularly brilliant time of it. But the only thing that I did have, which was mine, nobody else was into, was photography. So I got a camera when I was about, like an SLR, not a DSLR, an SLR camera when I was about maybe 14, something like that, and then started taking photographs, pretty much landscapes and friends. You know, a lot I used to photograph. So yeah,
that's nice. That's a really cool way of starting photography, just naturally letting it come.
You got to remember that those days. So this was 1984, 1986, something like that. I left school in 1988, so around about that sort of time. It was very much a career path in, ostensibly I won't go into my whole history, but I went out from that, did a couple of courses, and then went and become assistant photographer in London. So there was an industry there to go into, you know.
Is that going away now then?
Well, yeah. I mean, I started out as an assistant photographer around about 1990, around about then. And, you know, you'd walk down, I was saying this to one of the other students yesterday, you walk down Tottenham Court Road, and there'll be, assistants like myself kind of carrying rolls of film to take to labs. There'll be about maybe 4 or 5 in that local area.
Yeah.
Metro photography, basement, theatre, there's a bunch of others. But, and, there would be a lot of people, bikes would be taking film from one place to another. The studios, there'll be, a ton of studios, that would be around, and a ton of photographers. It was a proper industry. So, it's still there. I think Metro's still going, but it's kind of, I can't really quantify it. It's just smaller. It's so much smaller.
Fading away around.
It's just different. I mean, kind of going into the history of photography, but, digital technology, screen technology, the ability to kind of be able to put in moving images, the ancillary, if this is the right word to use, kind of, or support services that worked with photography to kind of get an image from a camera, process it, as in kind of chemically process it, and then process it as in kind of going through an editing process and putting it into a magazine and technically kind of putting it into a magazine. There's 10 or so people that would go through that process, if not more. So now it's, it's almost instant. It's almost instant, to kind of get that message across. So it's a completely different world.
Yeah.
So it's easy at that point to kind of go into that industry,
Yeah.
Yeah, it did change quite a lot.
Yeah. But, is there anything you're working on now or recently done?
Oh, now, what am I doing now? So yeah, I mean, I have. I mean, I think coming to the end of my, I suppose, commercial career in photography.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased about that. My aim now is to, maybe in a few years' time, when my son's old enough to get a little place out in the countryside with a room that I can turn into a dark room.
That's nice.
Yes.
That'd be
bloody well is, if I can use that terminology.
Yeah.
I won't use any other terminology.
We can bleep it.
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
It beeping well is. But no, it's you know what? It's just that thing of relaxing back on yourself, and kind of going, look, why are you doing it? And I'm sure we'll come into that in a minute, why and wherefores. But I've started using liquid emulsion to paint onto various different materials and then tone them. So to kind of create illusory worlds within landscape photography, and very much natural landscape. And that, I think, is it's actually a progression on from what I was doing before. But
it must take some very precise measurements with it.
But you bed into it. It's that thing of when I probably banged onto you lot quite a lot. It's like the discipline of working in the darkroom with analog photography. Yes, it's important to understand the exposure. What you're doing with the actual camera.
Yeah.
The process between the getting a good exposure in the camera itself and the print. So that having that discipline to be able to go through the process, but it takes practice, and since I've been here, I've been able to practice, and and I've got some nice photographs, I think, or some nice prints rather, that come out of it.
From what I've seen, they're pretty interesting and nice to look at.
Well, yes, we'll see. But I mean, a lot of it is trees, and there's the whole thing of kind of like the haunted landscape and that type of thing, and kind of, as I say, these illusory and imagined sort of landscapes, and so that's kind of what I would like to do.
I guess that ties into one of your projects that I find the most captivating. And I apologize, I'm going to need to read some of the terminology.
Yeah, go on.
Is the use of expressive and abstract images, exploring symbolic connection between photographs of places and personal experiences like trauma. What inspired you to explore that kind of memory and trauma?
So I think all the way through my career as a photographer, I've been interested in these kind of immersive spaces, and the idea of linking like place, as in kind of like a location, which you do when you take a photograph outside. So when you take a picture of a place, that place itself has got a certain loading of memory to it. If you can then start to make it more ambiguous, but then you're talking about little symbols within the image that actually kind of trigger memories, personal memories within the viewer, within the photographer. And I mean, there's this word that is kind of been bandied around quite a lot, and I've got to get my terminology right on this. It's phenomenology, right?
Right. Which
is pretty much studying. Now, let me get this right.
That's a big word.
It is a big word.
Yeah.
And I maybe I should have written it down. Phenomenology. Oh.
Do you want me to?
Yeah. So hang on a minute. Let's get this right. So it is about.
I'm going to quiz you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can quiz me. Keep it there because I've got to get this right. So it's basically the idea of studying yourself or people on their lived experience of various different things. So it's, and that could be yourself as well. So if you're studying through your creative process, your own lived experience of various different things that could have happened with you. So as you're doing that as an artist, you can either be very, it's a question of degrees. You can be very, very upfront and, Joe Spence is kind of jumping into my head with writing on her own body. Or you can be very abstract and kind of, suggestive through these little kind of, symbols. Am I getting this right?
Yeah,
the internet is kind of...
Yeah.
Blimey.
You proved yourself.
Yeah. So good. I'm glad. So give me a PhD. So basically kind of what I think that I did was I started to kind of going from landscape photography and immersing into these and trying really, really hard. But then what happened was, just to kind of like very quickly go into this, and otherwise it would be here 3 hours now. What I did was I think that when I did my MA, I started kind of looking at these immersive experiences, alternative worlds, and bringing in kind of, displacing trauma and things that I found difficult about myself within kind of these these worlds, these alternative worlds, and landscape photography is part of that. But I tried to kind of make it more ambiguous, and so using the abstract images, and I actually used it in London, and I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. I started taking pictures of individuals and then morphing those, amalgamating all those pictures together.
Yeah.
And then it turned into these streetscapes. And at one point, now her name is Sophie, I want to say Sophie Beckett, but I'm not sure it's Sophie Beckett. But anyway, she was a really good photographer. But she was tutoring us. Yeah. And she turned around and said, "Nick, do you think that it's because of you've done these because of your past experience with your wife?" And I literally, I didn't burst into tears, but I was like, beep. That really did change the way in which I, kind of sort of saw the world. You might have to beep that. Sorry. But but the thing is that it was like, wow, it was it blew my mind apart. So. Very, very quickly for, kind of those that don't know, is pretty much everybody. My ex-wife lost her legs in the London bombs, so it's fine. She's went to be a Paralympian. She jumped out of a plane. She's now kind of, she just went to Abbey Road. She's posted on Instagram, so she's doing well. But, obviously me being with her during that time, there was quite a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
So I think that, that played out, and I played out in my own mind the whole thing of, kind of how I felt about London at that particular time through those
visualizing it.
Yeah,
that's really...
Yeah.
It's really like kind of stripping down all the walls in a way as well.
Yeah.
Kind of it's really open and raw, and I think that's why I like looking at that piece you have of the trees, that big print.
Right, sure, yeah.
It feels like the greenery is just kind of, I can't think of the word.
I'll jump in because there's the ones that I did in London originally were all in black and white and they're very, very stark.
Yeah.
And then I transferred that actually when we moved out of London to doing the same thing but in the countryside. And I think it's like, you know, kind of a negative and a positive for me. The immersion for me personally, immersion in nature and exploring, you know, natural, you know, places which have got loaded with, you know, myth. So the photograph that you're referring to is Pendle Hill, which has got like a big history of, you know, kind of witch trials, and I wanted that because it is that historic displacement of, and there's a woman called Mary Warner that wrote a book called Phantasmagoria,
yeah,
and she basically writes and talks about all of these different, you know, instances of where people have written and create the artwork, which allows us to kind of take our own experiences, our own lived experiences, and reference them against, you know, other things that have happened historically. And myth is a wonderful thing because it's even more ambiguous, so you can kind of like lay whatever you want onto it.
Yeah.
And you know, we have horror genre and all the rest of it, but you know, that then kind of like is like taking the reality out of maybe past trauma and then putting it into something else, putting it into this, you know, safe place, I suppose. And that's kind of how I felt about doing those landscapes and going into the countryside.
Yeah.
Because that's actually always been a thing that I love deeply myself, you know, and that's still what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think the word I was looking for was isolated, kind of the safety of not being alone,
Yeah.
but not having the fear of anyone around seeing you in that open self.
Exactly that. There's always felt that when you're out in the countryside, you know, there's that absorption of who you are, but that non-judgmental sort of, you know, feeling that you get back. And you know, it's like family. It's like, you know, sometimes when you go into a place where there's history and you kind of sit there and you've got the history of all of these people that have been in this, specific people that have been in these places. And they've gone through this horror. And so, you know, you as a person that's experiencing it and has got your own horror that's gone on in your own life and stuff, you end up sort of being able to just maneuver, just take some of, you know, that and say, oh, I can see, you know, look at the piece of this place. You know, I know that you've had horrible histories, but you've had a traumatic past in this place, and you know your symbol of you being there. There's this place, this poor bloke who went and up into Dartmoor and you know, kind of died 100 years ago. William Doherty, I think his name is, and somebody had built a little kind of shrine to him. Not a shrine, but like a little, you know, here lies, you know, kind of William Doherty. And stuff. And it's up amongst all the gorse and stuff on this little valley, and there's a little river running through it. And you just think to yourself, the peace of that place, you know, and you know that I mean, if you look into it, they had a really tough time of it, you know, mental health wise. And that in itself, you know, when we talk about well-being and, you know, the community sort of aspect of photography, you know, I take a photo, display it, other people can then kind of like empathize with it and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? That's you know, that message within that context, it not only amplifies his, you know, trauma, bless him, but it kind of allows us to actually sort of start to do that thing of displacement and sort of, you know, oh, you found peace.
Kind of self-reflecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's always been something that I've tried to do with my artwork.
Yeah, no, I really like it. It leaves me speechless every time.
Oh, thank you. Very kind.
How would you approach kind of your project, kind of both creatively and ethically? Because obviously dealing with trauma, there's a lot.
I personally think it's a very, very important, if not one of the most important aspects of, or I suppose when I speak to the younger generation that are interested in photography, in space media, these sort of subjects come up again and again. You can, as I say, overtly reference yourself, and any kind of like issues, or kind of difficulties that people have had in their lives. You can reference them very, very on the nose and very abruptly in your face, or with a little bit of context, you can kind of use them specifically for yourself. I did quite a lot of study on phototherapy and brought up Joe Spence, but there are psychotherapists that will have used photography,
Right.
and a lot of it is to do with semiotics. A lot of it is to do with little symbols, as we were talking. So you don't necessarily have to allow everything out and kind of go, right, this is me, warts and all. You can be quite subtle, and also, and as I say, I think it's one of the most important, I don't know, canons, zeitgeist. I think it's probably a zeitgeist that is kind of around these days, that young people, and I say kids these days, but like young people kind of are going out. I know of a few of them that are going out and creating communities where they are looking at their own health and well-being, recovery, and they're using photography, lens-based media, to basically kind of form a framework around what they're doing. And I think that is, if you ask me, not that I'm anybody, but if you ask me, I think that is certainly over the past 30 or 40 years the most important aspect of photography.
Yeah.
There you go, I've said it.
It's so reflective in a way.
Yeah, because I think that is the power of photography now. It's not, the great patriarchal kind of like, Ansel Adams or, kind of Henry Cartier-Bresson, whoever. You know what I mean? That it sort of doesn't, it's like, oh, you look at me, I'm a craftsman, I'm wonderful, I can do this, it's beautiful. It's lovely to look at, and it's still there in the discipline of actually taking photographs. But, I would argue that even those people were doing it. What were they doing it for? Just so, they kind of want to say, oh, I can take a nice photograph of a mountain. Yeah, like, it's all very sublime. But, it's like the reality of what they were doing is that they were finding themselves. There's a guy called P.H. Emerson, in the late part of the 19th century, very Victorian kind of like, gentleman, stuff like that. But he went and hid on his little wherry in Norfolk to kind of get away from London society, because he wrote this little pamphlet on what photography should be, naturalistic photography. And it got kind of like slated, and he was hurt, and so he ran away. And then he created this beautiful book, it's well worth looking at, called Marsh Leaves, which is so fine and delicate, and kind of, it just brings in this winter sense of the the wetlands around Norfolk, and the Broads, Norfolk Broads, and it's beautiful. And he's put a little bit of poetry next to it, a little bit of prose, and it's a wonderful thing. But it's so introspective. So it's like, that I think is, well, it's not. If it's not, I think it's the most important thing about photography.
No, I agree with that. So I guess it's similar to there's more the history of William Eggleston and a book he did about colour and abstract colour and making it into an art form. And it kind of made these photographers who were like, oh, I only like black and white photography, to kind of reflect and view and start seeing colour as more of an art.
Yeah.
Or more the new standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. I mean, his influence, you know, poor old David Lynch, who died recently, really heavily influenced by William Eggleston. And I think you're right. It's interesting that Eggleston, I don't think, was a particularly outward-going, egotistical person.
No, there's a board meeting where a bunch of photographers were like, what does your photo mean? And his reply was something like, I just like shooting pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, he sort of said, he say about, you know, where he was taking pictures in the, you know, the Midwest, and, you know, it was, he couldn't go out and take photographs of anything because he couldn't go, you know, kind of travel around and stuff. So he just took pictures of the weirdness around where he lived. And yeah, I think that was the thing about it. It's kind of like, because of the abstract nature of the way in which he took photographs, and yeah, this sort of subdued color. So he used dye sublimation in his books, which kind of oversaturated and undersaturated in weird ways the color. And I think that that in itself, what I was going to say was that I think he didn't manufacture himself to work like that. He may have realized a bit down the line that people were reacting to him and going, well, he's kind of like a bit quiet and a bit odd, but that only adds to the kind of like peculiarity.
Yeah, and mystery.
Yeah, and exactly that. And he did write. I mean, the famous photograph of the red roof with the light bulb. He did write about what was going on, and I think it was, you know, some sordid house or something horrible was going on. And he didn't feel like he could take photographs of the thing that were going on, so he just took a picture of the ceiling or something. I might be getting that wrong, but you know,
I think you're right.
Something along those lines. But it was, you know, so yeah, it's like, I think that there's that lucky chance, and I think it's a wonderful thing that, in those days, I don't know. Yeah, you can still do it now. There's so many people doing it. But then, look, David Bowie turned around, right? You know, it was around about sort of 97, and he sort of sat down and he said, look, the internet would be wonderful because it will stop all of these icons. It will stop people, they're, you know, having these really big kind of iconic people that are, you know, stars. It would just kind of democratize everything. And you know what? Actually, that's completely what's happened. It was so prophetic, and it's like, you know, you kind of go, oh, why can't we get the William Egglestons? Why can't we get that funny little kind of, you know, flow of? But we do. Yeah, we get it. You know, and actually, kind of like everybody who kind of makes artwork has got that peculiarity to them because it's about themselves. If it's sorry. Being
yourself, as you say, and a bit of boldness to show that to the world.
Yeah. You know, and having a bit of boldness to show it to the world, that's an interesting way of. I think it's authenticity. Yeah. If you're authentic, and you know the type of person that you are, you express that. You know, and you know, I'm 50, coming up for 53, and I don't know that I've nailed it. And you know, I know that I can think of the guy that doesn't matter. No, it's just I'm thinking of people that might see this, or if they do see it, And they'll be thinking to themselves, you know, kind of like, I wish that, you know, 15 years ago he had actually kind of like nailed it about actually self-expression, because I think you get wrapped up, right, in this whole thing of kind of going, you know, oh, what does everybody else want me to say, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't, you know, you might as well just don't worry about it. Just say what you want to say about your authentic self, you know?
Yeah, well,
you know,
you've got the time now.
Mum? No.
Speaking on kind of self-reflection and stuff, what kind of achievements would you say you've made through your career? Sounds very bleak.
It is bleak. I made a lot of achievements. Do you know what? Working in a place like this, I think that's been, it's always been really enlightening. It's a little bit difficult, I have to say, but it's always been enlightening. Getting my MA, I think for somebody who's, well, you know, diagnosed with dyslexia, and these days knowing that I probably have ADHD to a certain level, you know, getting through that was really difficult, but I'm very proud of myself. And sort of being part of it, you know what I mean? Being there in the 1990s and, you know, kind of like working as an assistant and seeing that change from analog photography to digital photography to whatever's next, you know, and it's like, it's been quite nice to be part of that.
Yeah.
I've not won any awards. I'm not somebody who's successful. But then, as I say, I think that success is, you know, a load of bull, isn't it? It's a load of bull. It doesn't, you know, because you can be commercial. I can work in, you know, kind of like earn all my money, you know, and then, you know, kind of like be a photographer and do all of those things that we were talking about, you know, learn who I am. And okay, so that's the main thing. I've learned more about who I am and I've managed to express myself. And that deep love of nature and history and, you know, is referenced through my pictures. You know, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I don't really care, you know what I mean? Like other people kind of like win all the awards and go to all the photo-views and drink the wine and you know what I mean? It's like, I don't care about any of that anymore, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and nobody's going to make a book of my work, you know. Doesn't matter.
I'll put it on a list for you.
Eh?
I'll put it on a list for you.
Yeah.
One day I'll...
Yeah.
I don't want you to. Book mail.
I don't want it. There's no point. There's no point. You know, there's only one book that I'm going to write.
Got time to
okay, yes. Hi, Nick. I'm writing a book called Black Swan Lane. It's about an affected boy who goes and does his MSc in Sheffield, and ends up moving into a house where there's a whole bunch of ghosts. He ends up falling in love with the ghost that's in his room, and you know, it goes crazy. It's going to be a really good ride. Read it.
Read it when it comes out. I'll put a story on it, and you got to read it.
Okay. Yeah. No. Let's do a podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay.
So I guess the next part is, what advice would you give to emerging photographers? I mean, you've worked around emerging photographers for a while, and you've seen people come in and out. What advice would you give to them, either leaving uni or deciding to go for it?
I think that, from what we've just been saying, I think it's that thing of, you know, a lot of people will turn around to you. I might look. I'll look into the mid-distance. A lot of people will turn around to you and say, "Oh, you know, this is such a great opportunity. Come and work with me for £2.50 a month. It's such a great opportunity. I can make your life so much better," and all that sort of thing. And yeah, you know, think to yourself, well, okay, whatever I do in photography, you know, or as a career, I've got to make money to be able to pay the rent. But I think what you really should be trying to do, and just chucking all that other stuff out the window of being something special, but actually kind of get into being part of your authentic self. Do what you love. when I was about 16, 17, I went into these colleges and I was pushed down the line of, you need to go into fashion advertising.
Yeah.
Because fashion advertising is, you're going to make the most, where everybody kind of loves you. And, I'm never comfortable doing that. And I knew at that point, I'm quite good at just taking snaps of things. And I thought, well, that's too easy. But actually, looking back on it now, I wish that I'd just gone out of my little yashika and just taken a hell of a lot more pictures of just stuff. Because that stuff in 1986 or 1988 now is historic.
What got people talking.
And kind of my friends, they look at my photograph, my artistic photographs, and they'll go, oh, that's nice. And I put a photograph of us as mates, and we lucky enough to still know them, standing outside, the shops in Homer Green on our grifters and stuff. And everybody goes nuts for it because it's real. And so it's like, I wish that I'd kind of done a little bit more of that, of being just doing what I love without, kind of feeling pressurized to kind of go down a path that I didn't really necessarily need to. I would have always gone down the line of doing, I think, landscape photography because I love the countryside, but and I think I probably would have gone into abstract and all that type of thing. But it's that thing of just being authentic and just doing what you love doing. That's the only advice. And then the whole thing of, you'll find out 20 years down the line that you were taking all these photographs because of, something that you were trying to understand about yourself. And then you'll go back and you'll go, oh, flipping heck, I've worked on all of these pictures and there's a thread that goes through this. And then you'll sit there and you'll cry and you'll go, it's because of this. And it'll be some sort of traumatic thing that happened in your past. Yeah. I'm not saying that always happens, but I can guarantee that a lot of the time it happens,
Yeah, I guess there is, with reflection, there's also influence that comes with it. How would you say, with expressing yourself and being bold about it, how would you say they find their voice and not be influenced by kind of not so much media but trends in photography?
Embrace the madness, but don't be affected by it, or just sort of hold it at arm's length a little bit. It doesn't matter. Actually, it doesn't matter. You might be an artist that kind of goes, right, okay, I'm going to work with AI, and you go, right, that's what I'm going to do. And you might be really successful, whatever success is. It might work for you, and you kind of carry it. But you might not. You might kind of think to yourself, right, I'm going to do, I don't know, genotypes, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do, kind of, sustainable photography, and that's what I'm going to do. But then it doesn't really matter. And I think that's one thing that we have now, that the actual trends, if somebody's trying to push you down a particular path, that's not good. It's in kind of like, you should do it like this, you should do it like that. It's about how you feel, the media that you're using, and actually I think that you should try to explore, everybody should try to explore as many different media as they possibly can, to kind of see whether your output, the actual kind of presentation of what you're doing, feels, and it is all about feeling, right to get that message across.
Yeah, I guess I'm finding the more I try and think about what I want to do, leaving uni photography-wise, becomes more broader the more I try and narrow it to a certain type of photography. It kind of doesn't want me to stay in a single line because there's so much to photography. Trying to think of the word again.
But I think that's important, because if you're authentic to yourself and what you love about photography, it doesn't matter really whether it's portraiture in the studio or it's, I don't know, whatever else it is, taking landscapes or whatever the genre is. But it's like that theme and that, you know, that little thread will kind of come through because that's what you love about communicating, I suppose, visually, you know. So I think it's good. It's good that you don't, you know, kind of pin yourself down. You might do it in a 20 years' time. You might kind of go, right, this is what I'm going to do. I love it. And so I'm happy with this. And I'm, poof, you know what I mean? And you'll have the big kind of monograph book. You know, Lyla, I can see it now.
Be 2 books.
Would it? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be my book, and then there'll be an archive book of all your prints.
Oh, right.
With that and all,
what
changes do you think is needed in photography, and how can emerging photographers kind of create the change?
What's needed in photography? Okay, contentious. I think that photography needs to stop looking so much into the past. I think that there is an awful lot of people out there still that think that you know, photography is all about, you know, analog photography. It's all about, you know, kind of documentary photography. It's all about, you know, these very, you know, kind of modernist, I suppose, sort of ideas of, you know, I don't know, whoever, Bill Brandt or, you know, Gary Winogrand or, you know, I don't know, whoever. And they're all, it's almost like it's like we're looking back at the totems of what photography is and going, well, hold on a minute, they were all in the 20th century, you know. And I think we've got to start to let go of what that means. Technically, I think, you know, from a formal point of view, and kind of start to let go of that. And then, you know, what is a photograph now? Well, it's a symbolic thing. You know, it's a photorealistic. You know, what is that? What is photorealistic? You know, is it, you know, it looks like that person? Well, you know, hold on a minute. I mean, yeah, it's a recording of that, but well, it is not a recording of that person anymore because it goes through a digital process which can be completely destroyed and brought back together, all completely made up by AI anyway. So it's not an optical thing; it's something else. You know, the camera never lies was a 20th century trope because of, you know, the light going through the lens and hitting the film.
It was physical in a way.
It was, yeah, and it's like I think people still kind of hold on to that because that's what photography is. Well, I don't know that it is. I think that it's something else now. It's its own abstractness. You know, it's got its own, you know, and that with AI, and I say embrace the madness, but it's like whether it kind of is photographically real or it goes down a trope of anime or it goes down a trope of
super real.
So, you know, we go hyper real, which was where photography was trying to go in the late part of the 20th century, and then digital came along and it was hyper real, and everybody goes in the opposite direction. But yeah, you can kind of use any of that, you know, plasticine models of people, you know, whatever it is, all of those different tropes of how to represent in a photographic way. Is it photography or is it digital art? You know, is it, you know what I mean? It's like, how is it represented? If I take a picture, right, and of a person, and I scratch no, hold on a minute. I'll take a picture of a person, I then print it out on inkjet, I then Gar hard Richter it with a bunch of like paint, and I sort of scrape it all off, and there's still that person there. Then I re-photograph it on an analog camera, and then I take it to the darkroom and I put it into a tray, and then it goes blue or goes sepia, and then I kind of like stick it on the wall and I burn it and I put it under the ground for 6 months. You know what I mean? It's still a photograph. It's you know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. It's like, in the end of the day, how you put that out to the world, whether it's on Instagram and it's very 2D, or it's moving image, or it's a print of something real and tactile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter. I think it should be a lot more free, and move away from this whole thing of photography as a photograph, because
I guess it's been back to the kind of being yourself and being bold with it, and kind of pushing new practices, or from what I've heard, there's a new color or some new colors being discovered, and it's like to explore those, or to make our own history for it to be reflected on again.
Yeah, exactly. Making your own history, that's interesting. Sorry, I've just noticed somebody's trying to come in. Yeah, making your own history. I think that's definitely it. That's what it's always been about. And it's actually very rock and roll, isn't it? Because you kind of, if you go, I think when that's authentic, whereas if you get somebody, I don't know, I'm picking on Ansel Adams for some reason, I don't know why. He's great, but it's like, is Ansel Adams really making his own history? Not really. He's trying to kind of display in his own way, in a very kind of sublime sort of sense, of what the American West looked like at that particular time. But it was very kind of, it was very abstract, because it wasn't actually like that all the time. And in his opinion, it was very subjective. You know what I mean?
There's the science of it, kind of, that's the abstract, because photography was considered kind of scientific and technical with the film development, but taking it onto another level with how the photo's actually taken. Yes,
exactly that. And that was always the rip between what is scientific and a record, and the agency of the photographer to be able to augment it and turn it into something larger than life, hyper real, as you were saying. But that is very subjective to the photographer. Whereas, we were talking about, kind of creating your own memories, or creating memories, creating your own sort of way of seeing the world and that history, creating your own history. That's what you're saying. It's like, that's really rock and roll, because you're actually kind of creating something new that is, much more about your history and your, the community that you're in and the people that you're around, and how that kind of works. I suppose it's all the same thing.
It's then really yours.
Eh?
It's then yours in a way. It's not coming from something, obviously, like you have influences from other artists, other work you've seen. Yeah. But when you've seen it and then you use your own inspiration with it, you create something new, and that's kind of the practice that happens anyway.
Yeah.
But it's kind of being bold and, I'm looking for the word, embracing it to make it something.
Yeah. Even if it's just for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, absolutely. Being bold.
Going back to William Eggleston, his work was for himself.
Yeah.
And to Adams, in a way.
Well, I mean, I think, I think, yes, you're right. And there is always that thing. I was doing that stuff about P.H. Emerson. It's like, there's this kind of duality, it's like they feel like you have to kind of give out this impression of who you are, to the world, and what your talent is, and also, what your impression of the world is through your lens, but at the same time, and I think that duality is kind of, now kind of like collapses in on itself. Where, I think that it's more important to actually express who you are through your lens, rather than how important how important you are. What you're trying to say within. No, hang on. Let me get this right. So somebody like P.H. Emerson would take photographs and put them up on the wall to say, this is what the world is like. I am re-representing this in an objective way, but I am the conduit for all of this magic. That on one hand he's saying that. On the other hand, he's sort of going, yeah, but I really love this environment. I feel more most at home. I actually can't stand, Victorian bloody culture. It gets on my nerves. They're all pompous. And so he kind of, that's what he's really saying. But I think now you kind of go through that whole thing, and it's actually kind of more that feeling of like, right, I'm taking photographs because I'm expressing what I feel about the world, and how I relate to the world. And it's all of that thing about, me being a big kind of like, doesn't exist anymore, which I think is a really, really good thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's self-validating your opinion.
Yeah.
To the point where photography's reflection refines it to something that can be perceived as either like factual or impactful to others.
Yes. And it does that in a very empathic way.
Yeah.
So it's not telling, it's showing.
Yeah.
And you can interpret that. I knew that was going to happen. Sorry, everybody. Let's shut it up. Not quacking.
Well, I think we should
at that point
leave it at that. That's quite a nice way to end it.
At the cracks.
Thank you, Nick, for coming on to In Focus.
In Focus.
It's been lovely having you on.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to say before?
No. I just thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and good luck with the rest of your career. I was going to say degree, but then it came out as career and life.
Yeah.
And I hope that you do very, very well, and we'll be kind of like continuing this. Get me back once you're very famous.
Definitely. Once you've got your book written.
Yes, and I will be back to kind of, and then we can kind of talk about Black Swan Lane and the success of that, after
number one seller.
That's it. Once I've sold, I'd have to come back after I've sold about 3 million copies, I think.
Easy.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I guess, where can people, listeners or viewers, find your work?
Instagram, Nick Wiltshire, and Blue Sky. I think if you type in Nick Wiltshire, hopefully Blue Sky it might come up. But Blue Sky is great. It's full of really nice people.
Well, I'll leave any links in the description below.
Okay.
If any of you want to check out Nick Wiltshire's work, it's really some great stuff, and
God bless you.
It would be pretty. What's the word?
Awesome. I don't know. No.
Pretty impactful.
Impactful.
That's
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very kind. Yeah. Take of it what you will.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Whether you found me on Instagram, which is probably first way at the moment, because that's the only social I have. Be sure to check out the video if you're listening on YouTube, or tune in on Spotify for more episodes coming soon. I'm so happy that I've been able to start this and have this first episode, and I'm delighted to have you as our very first guest.
Thank you, I'm very honoured.
And this has been In Focus.
Yay!
Woo!
Woo! Right.